Welcome to our video blog on prophetic visions in near-death experiences. There are links listed in the video description to our website and to the full presentation of our study. Today we want to present the full prophetic visions from NDEr Ken Leth about political conflict and civil strife in the U.S. Ken's NDE occurred in 1963 when he was 8 years old, and he underwent surgery for a burst appendix. During the NDE, a spiritual being he called Teacher pointed out the visions on a globe of the world in the region of the U.S. At the end of his NDE, another spiritual being he called Mother suppressed most of his visions to protect him. She said they would return later in his life. They returned as visions starting in his early 20s. I want first to trace the revelation of Ken's visions over time. For many NDErs, the visions can come back gradually over time, as more and more details come into focus. As the NDEr recounts the visions, even more details can come out. So it's important to trace back when Ken's visions first appeared as a whole picture and how the visions were later elaborated. Ken has been interviewed 6 times on IN's NDE Radio, which is a weekly internet podcast with Lee Whitting. During several of these interviews, Ken shared details of his visions, and links to these interviews are listed in the notes to this video. In the November 16, 2015 interview, Ken first shared that he sometimes has had powerful dreams or visions of future events, generally 1 or 2 days before the event happened. He described his visions of the 9/11 attack on the Twin Towers, including the crash of United Airlines Flight 93 near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. He also described his vision of the December 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, seen from a vantage point in outer space over the Indian Ocean. As is typical of other NDErs, Ken didn't understand what these visions meant until the events happened. In the November 2015 interview, Ken also mentioned, quote, "With my meditations of late, I believe I'm remembering some of the things that will follow. I saw wars and fighting and other events in relation to the United States." Lee Whitting encouraged him to write a book about this. In early March 2016, Ken's visions of the disruptive president came back. He wrote later that his vision was of a terrible man who caused much trouble for our country. "I remembered this angry man as being someone who would cause a lot of trouble. I was shown he would be the leader of opposition to Hillary Clinton, and he would cause Americans to lose faith in their government." And then, in the NDE radio interview on March 14, 2016, Ken gave the rest of the outline of the visions relating to the United States. He said that the clarity was increasing. Quote, "I am remembering much more. I wish I could remember exact things that were said, but perhaps that will come later." He then related all of the other major events of these visions. A large government building where an important decision was made, a mass rebellion among certain people of the evangelical faith, a woman running for president, then a lot of fighting, a battle, a war being fought in the southeast. This would be a civil war much worse than the first. No highly technical weapons used, but a lot of people dying. An army coming from the west, a final battle around Atlanta, and a final seismic eruption originating around Yellowstone that will destroy the U.S. Subsequently, in June 2017, Ken published the full account of his life in a Kindle book, including his NDE and his visions. Unfortunately, he later removed the book from Kindle because he felt he had written sensitive details about his family. In the book, Ken shared more about the angry man. Quote, I remember him as very angry, like a bully that caused disruption on purpose. I also remember being shown that he fooled or tricked the people, and that he would be part of why Americans lost faith in government. He also seemed to be the organizer of the fighting in the streets. Ken also related that this man appeared in a spinning type of disruption, which meant that he would die soon afterward. After he is gone, there appeared to be a sense of hope returning to the country, but it's too late, and the seeds of evil that he plants continue to grow until more disruption returns and the ultimate battles of the Civil War begin. So, as Ken continued to meditate and talk to others about his visions, he continued to fill in the vision's details. In December 2018, he commented, "The more I speak about my memories of the future, the more I find there are details coming to the front that were previously hidden." In our analysis, the description of Ken's vision has become more organized and filled in, but it has not deviated in its basic outline since his 2017 book. Here is the detailed narrative of Ken's vision. This text is copyrighted by Ken Leth. He has given us permission to republish it here. Please note that the characterizations in Ken's prophetic visions are controversial. As NDE researchers, our focus is on the objectively demonstrable facts of a prophetic vision rather than the characterizations made in the vision. Each one of the factual aspects of these visions can be checked by anyone, whether they do or did actually occur. More importantly, each foreseen event can be averted or mitigated by people making different decisions at each step of the way. Ken's visions start with the JFK assassination. I saw the assassination of JFK and was told it would trigger a period of turmoil, that it would be the beginning of some bad events in the U.S., and those events would eventually make our nation bitter. I wanted to know why God would let such terrible things happen. She, the teacher entity, explained that mankind continued to wage war instead of practicing peace and forgiveness, and that terrible events sometimes take place because of our conduct. And here's a comment. This part of his vision happened a few months after his NDE in 1963. Kennedy was assassinated in November 1963, and his NDE was in September 1963. He was immediately shown this, but much of the rest of what he was shown was suppressed. Next, an important Supreme Court ruling. Then the vision jumped to a point in the future, much later in my life. I was told this next vision would be happening close to the end of our power and influence as a nation. I saw what looked like a large government building with multiple tall pillars in front, and there would be some discussion and debating going on inside. I think it was the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C. And I was told that an important ruling would take place there. This caused a kind of mass rebellion, centered in the hearts of people, mostly men. Many of them were of the evangelical religion, a form of Christianity that would do great harm. A lot of the anger and frustration that will be brought out is in their hands. They are going to be responsible for it because of their political activity. Comment? This is probably the Supreme Court ruling in June 2015 that guaranteed the fundamental right of same-sex couples to marry. Next, a woman is running for president. Then the vision changed where I observed a woman speaking during her presidential campaign. She was running for office during a period of much turmoil. I did not observe her serving as president, only speaking with a loud voice during her campaign. I later heard Hillary Clinton speak during her campaign, and it was the same voice I heard in the vision. Also, I did not see her as a bad person, like so many people believe she is. She was one of the last good chances to turn our country around. Next, storms cause considerable damage. Next, I was shown a vision of the Atlantic Ocean. It was churning as if angry. I could feel water spraying, and I heard the rain hissing as if a terrible storm was blowing against the East Coast. I could see that Florida received the most damage, with the states north of there being damaged as well. I didn't see the storms as a one-time event. I got the impression that the oceans will remain angry, and they will continue to cause a lot of damage. Continued fighting in the desert countries. I could feel the unhappiness of the people living during this time, and I was told that along with the storms causing disruption, our nation had been waging war in a desert region on the other side of the planet. I saw a large military armada of ships leaving the East Coast to sail out into the world to fight. This was a representation of waging war and not a specific event. I saw how much the people living in the desert countries hated us, and they asked why we had made their lives more difficult. The fighting was a waste of resources that make our country suffer economically, thus adding to the disruption of their lives. Comment: this probably refers to our continued military presence in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and the Gulf states. A vile, disruptive man becomes president. Next, I saw a man leading our country, and he is president. He is a vile, disruptive man who causes people to lose faith in our government. I also observed the passing of new legislation that involves taxes, or the way money is handled, which makes American life more difficult. The man is arguing with everybody, causing unhappiness and disruption. I remember the man being blonde. A comment: most people would agree that the factual events in Ken's vision from 1963 have so far been accurate, but not necessarily his characterizations of them. The rest of Ken's vision has yet to happen. The disruptive president is removed from office. Then a group of men confront this president in his Oval Office. He was pushed out of his position in government. Next, he was removed from the government buildings as he stood outside on the steps of a government building, probably in Washington, D.C., shouting to crowds, shaking his fist. Comment: please note, the vision does not say when exactly or how the president comes to be removed. And again, remember that this vision was given to Ken in 1963. The disruptive former president incites violence. He is extremely angry and he incites violence in the streets. He is encouraging people to be destructive. He causes riots. I could see a large crowd of people demonstrating in a city on the East Coast where people are fighting and injuring each other. There were men in the crowd that appeared as dark shadows, people with evil intent, and I got the impression that they were not Americans. Either they were brought over here from another country to help the terrible man, or they are white nationalists who have support from a foreign nation. They were working purposely to cause more violence, pushing people to fight in the streets, using misinformation. The evil president encourages them to fight. The most fighting occurs in a major city on the East Coast, south of New York City. There will be fighting in other places as well, mostly eastern cities. Then the fighting kind of dies down. How to respond to the incited violence. People should not trust the dark, shadowy people. Do not fight in the streets with them. Do not follow them. If counter-protesters encounter people inciting violence who start being destructive, do not engage them. Immediately sit down. Lay your signs down and sit. Do not move. Do not protest. And do not join in the destruction and damage. How the disruptive man became president. At this point, I asked the teacher entity how it was that this terrible man came to be our president. I was shown a vision of the Bible, and something like a line of progression. The path humanity would take through the ages appeared to be weaving through the pages. Then I saw the line of progression jump out of the Bible to highlight the development of churches in old Europe. Eventually, the ideals they established come over to America with the migration of people who established churches of their own in the U.S. Then the line of human progression jumped out of the Bible again to highlight Southern evangelist religions. It was pointed out that these new churches would become quite evil because they dare to represent God while they beg for money from the old and feeble. They show no remorse, and their leaders live lavish lives. These churches only worship money and political involvement, and they guide people to vote for the angry president. They are doing this in the name of God, which is a horrible sin. The evangelical movement was a main influence in getting the terrible man elected. They promote him as someone God supports. The disruptive former president falls ill and dies. The fighting in the streets after he is removed from office has the nation shaken and appalled, but after a while the fighting settles down. Then I saw the evil president inside a disruption like a spinning spiral wheel. I understand this image to mean that he would pass away, thus ending his influence. I saw him in a hospital bed with his family standing around him before the spinning disruption indicated his passing. The president will not live very long after leaving office. I don't know what causes the evil president to die. Widespread fighting flares up again, becoming a civil war. After he is gone, there appeared to be a sense of hope returning to the country among those who did not like the disruptive president. But it's too late, and the seeds of evil he planted continue to grow until more disruption returns, and the ultimate battles begin. After his death, suspicions and disbelief are prevalent. His strongest supporters have a hard time accepting that he is gone. They become more agitated and more upset, mostly in the southeast U.S., in states north of Florida, also mostly among evangelical Christians. The circumstances of his passing seem to anger people, especially in the South, and the fighting in the streets flares up again to a heightened level. The people who want to fight reject the government's legislation and reject its leadership. They won't follow it, and they try their best to turn others onto their side. At this point, America is divided in a similar fashion as the previous Civil War of the 1860s, and most of the fighting takes place in cities in the south and eastern states, where the country is more densely populated. The fighting will be fanned by foreign influence because I saw dark, shadowy people, non-Americans, among the crowds who were encouraging violence. I think the dark shadow people are white nationalists with possible support from a foreign power. In the visions where they were identified, I could feel their covert evil intentions that were foreign to the general goodness of most Americans. The new Civil War will be much worse than the previous Civil War. I stopped to ask the teacher entity if this wasn't the previous Civil War that I had learned about in school, and she clarified that this coming war would be a separate Civil War, and it would be much worse than the first one. I didn't see highly technical weapons being used, but I did see a lot of people dying. People were killing each other out of pure hatred, and there was no safe place in America. Disruption of media in the South. I could see the dark, shadowy people again. They looked like silhouettes, this time doing their evil deeds outside a building in the city in the South. A center of information, a broadcast of some kind, a source of information that people rely on. It could be tied to the internet or cable TV broadcasting. They were working to get inside in a covert way. They break in. People are getting hurt, and they shut the place down. The broadcast studio is destroyed in an explosion. This vision takes place somewhere in northern Georgia, possibly in Atlanta. The destruction of the TV studio appeared to be a demonstration designed to shock and disrupt along political lines. This building is important because the shadowy people now provide a flow of information that causes people to become more agitated and more angry. An army is formed in the west and moves east. The TV studio event is a trigger for expanded civil disruption. After the TV studio is attacked, I saw a line drawn through the center of the U.S., and an army is formed in the west, stretching north to south. The line appeared to follow a path similar to the Mississippi River. Two evil men are key leaders in spreading fighting and disruption. After the broadcast building is invaded, two evil men are brought into the limelight and are blamed for the studio destruction. They are key players in the spread of fighting and disruption. One is more evil and powerful than the other, and I got the impression that money is involved with their desire to foster chaos. They provide information that confuses or misleads their followers. People follow them and recognize them as leaders, but the men do not care about their following, and their ultimate goal is to betray the people, which causes much death and destruction. The two evil men are part of an organization of some kind deep in the southeast. It could be a government building that's occupied by extremely evil men. They are extremely arrogant people who have total disregard and lack of respect for America in general and for the general good of the people. They don't care. Behind the scenes, they are secretly feeding and fueling this disruption and doing it through money and influence. People are getting upset and are doing terrible things to each other based on the leadership these two men are giving. The more evil man is laughing and enjoying the disruption and destruction, the death, the tearing apart of the fabric of our culture. That's all he wants. I was very disgusted watching that. He is not a foreigner, but he seems to be the leader of the shadowy people. He could have some foreign influence. I remember his dark hair, and his laugh is just evil, really enjoying the disruption. The fighting intensifies. Next, I saw a tremendous amount of destruction as full-blown war is waged by the army from the west. It is completely out of control. I'm not sure if all the destruction is caused by the army alone, or if some kind of natural disaster like an earthquake is involved. But the U.S. is brought to its knees. I vaguely recall seeing a large number of people drowning all at once. Also, I'm not sure if the West Army is American. I wasn't told who they represent, but I got a strong sense that another country was taking advantage of the disruption caused by our civil disruption, and perhaps our government had betrayed us. The army in the West pushes the resistance all the way down to the final battle, which is going to be around Atlanta. This army will win. I don't know what country is behind it. At the close of the fighting in the South, I now remember seeing more men involved in the deceit, along with an evil force being revealed. The additional men will be involved with the root of evil that the army from the West will uncover. They will be arrogant and self-righteous. My own involvement during the chaos and fighting. At this point, the teacher entity stopped the flow of the future visions to highlight my personal involvement during the chaos and fighting. I could see myself at a point in time when I was an adult and I was caught in a spinning tunnel or disturbance, which I have come to realize means the moment of death. This would be the moment of my death. The two evil men are ultimately overcome. The two evil men had control over subversive activities, and they stood arrogant against the nation. They lose control over the chaos they have caused through their lies. and they are eventually overcome. There's a period where the people who were listening to them stop and begin to think more independently. They begin to realize that they believed many wrong things, and they wonder why the fighting was necessary. But it's too late, because overall the country has been greatly weakened. It will be revealed that the two evil leaders of the white nationalists are not as powerful as the additional men I recall being exposed at the end of the fighting. The Civil War ends, and there is remorse and sorrow. Once the war is over, there's a short period of calm as people come to grips with what is left, and some rebuilding begins. I detected a great sense of remorse and sorrow, and people were asking themselves why they fought. People in the Southeast were sitting around listless, asking themselves, why did we believe so many wrong things? That was the cause of everything we see now. Nothing but destruction. An enormous explosion in Wyoming or Montana, destroying all life on the continent. This period of calm does not last long, because the next thing I was shown involved a huge explosion coming from the area of Wyoming or Montana. A giant mushroom cloud forms above the explosion, and a ring of white clouds that stays close to the ground expands across the continent, all the way to the east coast, as all life is extinguished. The fighting and civil disruption that took place before the explosion was for nothing, and it's a horrible waste of humanity. I do not believe I will live to see this explosion. Comment. This may be a supervolcanic eruption of the Yellowstone caldera in Wyoming. It could also be a huge bomb blast. North America gradually returns to life with small groups of people living simple lives. After the explosion, I saw that North America remains uninhabited for a long time as it becomes overgrown with many trees again. But eventually there will be human activity. I was shown a small group of people living in a hut-type structure in the southeast. They were living very simple lives, very spiritual lives, much like tribes of natives before the U.S. was established. They were very peaceful and loving. Now humanity, the U.S., is back on track. It's a step forward. Beyond that time, I saw the light of the sun becoming intensely bright, and that was the end of my vision. The lessons from these visions. Ken concludes his narrative with the following. I want to help people turn away from hatred and disregard of others because it leads to war, and to focus more on practicing peace and forgiveness instead. When we judge others to the point that we have justified injuring them, we have taken the wrong path. But if people help each other and love is involved, then the trauma and the disruption, the coming chaos that I was shown, does not have to be as bad as what I was shown. Humanity has another step to go through, and I believe it's to become much more spiritual and much more aware of the gifts God has given all of us. The more I talk about it, the more I realize that we have some serious soul-searching to do. The changes in our collective behavior can ease our transition into more spiritual beings. That doesn't mean we can avoid a major earthquake or some sort of natural disaster, but we will be better prepared to deal with a natural disaster when it comes if we don't resort to war. If we are in the practice of helping each other and always reaching out a helping hand and accepting each other, if we're working through love, then the natural disasters that probably are going to take place will not have to be so traumatic, and we'll be better prepared to deal with them. The more I speak about my memories of the future, the more I find there are details coming to the front that had previously remained hidden. My hope is that I will remember what my personal influence will be during the fighting and chaos of the future Civil War, because I can see it happening very soon. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our channel. We'd love to hear what you think, and we'll try our best to respond to your comments.